How's it going? We're gonna discuss the movie Sunshine. This is Riley. She watched the movie with me. Okay. Well, first let's talk about what you think. How was it?
It wasn't what I was expecting. Like, I didn't think that it would be. I thought it would focus more on the advertising part and less on the cultural differences part, but I also liked that because I thought it was important when talking about advertising in cultures that are not extremely similar to your own, that things do differentiate.
I also feel like that was like the main point of the movie was about the cultures. Like, I don't know. It's kind of what I got out of it is that, like, you know, this dude basically came in, different culture, came in with an expectation that he was going to have to figure stuff out, and he was going to have to figure out their culture and how to communicate. There were a lot of barriers there. But he ended up learning something different about himself. And that was like, I don't know. There's a better way to say it, but that's the gist I got out of it.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting the way that the film itself highlighted the way that the advertisement differed for McDonald's there and how he had to adjust himself. Like, he kept talking about how they kept saying, she's not sunshine, she's not perfect. And he was kind of getting frustrated, it appeared, that he was giving them all these people or all these ideas, and they were just like, no, she's not sunshine, she's not sunshine. And he didn't really understand, like, what to make of that or what that meant. So I thought it was really interesting how he had to kind of adapt his ideas and work with those people in order to make them happy and please them, while also using his advertising expertise and his advertising background and skills in order to also make the best commercial for McDonald's.
And that's, that's the thread he kind of picked up on himself. I mean, I don't know if he picked up on it being a thread, but just like the whole happiness thing, like McDonald's as a representation of like what that is. And it's not necessarily that people are actually like happy about McDonald's, like it's a representation of like the cultural changes that have occurred for their society as they've shifted from their past ideals into a generation that is conforming to like the rest of the world, essentially, right? Like all these capitalist, like Americanized like businesses,
the Western ideas,
like all of those like cinematography, like when they were filming around and they had all the shots of like of all the businesses and whatnot.
Yeah, of all the chains. I thought that was really interesting. Like, I thought the camera angles and the way that the cameraman decided to include those shots of like Subway, I think was one, and there was a couple other ones of images of
it was like the big also
American
like the cities too at the end, at the very end.
I was talking about before, sorry. So I thought that was really interesting too, because like it's the whole idea, like, yes, you're making a commercial for McDonald's in China, but it's different than the McDonald's that we have here. Like, the experience is different, the advertisements are different, the food is different, and I think that was really interesting.
The confusing part for me about the film is that it was talking a lot about, like, the representation of, like, what that, that happiness meant to the people, and yet by the end, our main character is going through his own sort of internal conflict, like, is it okay for this place to like have gone through substantial change that like basically hurt their society? And by that, I'm just talking about like historically based, like the Chinese Cultural Revolution and all that stuff. And how it brought them out of like what was called the Century of Humiliation, which was like just when they were under submissive rule from like not imperialist, but imperialist like colonial nations coming in and just setting up shop there. And then that was the thing, is like that's why it's Mao like is a representation of the Chinese happiness, like
the sunshine. He's the sunshine.
Yeah, he's the sunshine, but it's not like it's not what he did. It's what he did for the country and how I could sit here and say he also drove the country into the ground, which is also very true. But like. It's what he did for the people and how he evoked a certain feeling of community and like patriotism in people that had never really felt that since the early dynasties.
And I thought the way that you talked about the internal conflict before connects to the same in the end with the music they played, and it kind of, showed the music kind of set the scene more.
It guides the emotion sort of as like, at the end you sit in that car reflecting on everything around him. He sees all the big lights, all the big corporate stores,
He's, like,
all these
reflecting.
huge skyscrapers. And
Yeah.
it's almost a parallel. Like, he feels like he's back in the same place he was because he made that comment before. He feels like he's back in America because he made that comment about, you travel, you try to see these new things, and it's just more the same. You never
it's more the same, like the same restaurants,
like,
the same types
you have
of buildings.
this idealized view of like what you're going on, or that you are going on some sort of like adventure. Something when you go, you go abroad, and next thing you know, like it's just a representation of how the world is sort of conforming.
Yeah, and going off what
to a
you
certain
said,
ideology.
Yeah, and like going off what you said about how like the similarities, like when you go to new places, like
Right.
something that just reminded me of was like when they were shooting the commercial for the McDonald's, and the guy was talking about like his mouth was on fire with the fire truck or whatever, and he's like, doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. The guy was like really confused, and he's like, I don't really understand what's happening, but like all the people like here who are representing the Chinese culture like are really liking it, and they think that it's good, like gonna work. So
I appreciated him as a narrator through this because he was going through, the same sort of struggle we were as like an audience, which is pretty cool. In terms of like he saw these things and he didn't really like judge them as wrong or
just different,
like, or not even just different. Like he almost appreciated them for being different. And
showed him a different perspective.
As the this short kind of progressed, he sort of developed this mindset to appreciate things that appreciate parts of cultures that are from the past. I can't finish my sentence, but you know what I'm saying.
But I understand what you're trying to say.
Right,
and I think that was just really interesting the way that we had his personal commentary on the differences and the changes and things that he saw. So we were talking throughout the movie like, oh, that's really interesting. Like the fire truck scene again, like we were both like, what is going on?
Yeah,
and then the guy said it too, and I was like, okay, like I like that we're seeing his perspective through him actually explaining what he's seeing and feeling.
And like, I mean, I completely agree. And that's exactly what I was trying to say. All right. So let's talk about the protagonist, antagonist of the film.
Okay.
And how it applies to the overall message.
So I think the protagonist, is the Chinese people in the film and the culture and the connection to the sunshine and the happiness and staying happy through the changes and the things going on with their country, the politics in their country, their leaders, etc.
Okay.
Just the whole idea of like the protagonist because they're focused on like staying happy and the staying with the sunshine.
So and then that scenario,
I'm loving it.
The antagonist, I guess, would be the like, would you say it's the capitalist? Maybe
like the westernized ideas.
Maybe not even like westernized ideals. Yeah,
like the westernized influence.
But it's westernized influence because it's just invoking change too.
Well, it's not even just because it's invoking change, but it's invoking like assimilation almost. Like it's creating
like
conformity.
Like I said that. Yeah, I was saying that earlier. Just lost my train of thought. But
it's the Western ideas are coming in and. Not necessarily forcing people to all be the same, but influencing them to be more similar.
It's monetarily influencing too, which is somewhat. He talks a lot about deceit in his occupation as an ad dude, and how he's like, I'm constantly pulled with deceit and knowing if it's like, it was worth me to go work for this McDonald's company who offered me all this money, but there's always that burning artist part of me that just wants
it's like, I want to do something more than this almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's interesting too, because like when you think about it from, I guess, like a larger perspective, like, okay, if fast food hadn't been introduced into China, would they still be eating burgers and french fries? Probably not. If that's the Western idea
and maybe they
types
wouldn't
of food and culture that is being implemented. So I just think that's an easy way to make a tangible example of it. It's like, okay, like the presence of these fast food chains in general, or these types of restaurants, these Western food restaurants. So.
No, yeah, I agree. God, this movie has so much going on.
I know.
I feel like we just, like, I don't know. Okay.
Not everything? Do we talk about everything?
I think archetypes. Ooh.
Oh, okay. We can talk about archetypes.
The fall. So, do you know what the fall archetype is?
I don't. Why don't you explain it to me?
Here. Why don't you read it out loud to me?
Okay.
Here.
Let me just read what's right there. Okay. Not to be confused with the awareness in the initiation, this archetype describes a descent in action from a higher to a lower state of being, an experience which might involve defilement, moral imperfection, and or loss of innocence. This fall is often accompanied by expulsion from a kind of paradise as penalty for disobedience and or moral transgression.
Agree, disagree?
I I agree, but I think this is almost a little of an extreme idea, but I do think it's applicable here.
Okay, explain what you mean.
So, like, okay, this fall is often accompanied by an expulsion from a kind of paradise as penalty for disobedience and or moral transgression. Like, I didn't really see any disobedience or moral transgression necessarily.
I don't know that it exactly has to be disobedience or moral imperfection. I actually think that when I was considering this archetype as like what this short could fit into, and as I was like contemplating that, I sort of started to realize that like it did go from, first off, it did go from a higher state to lower state. That's just what this is trying to say. I feel like that's what this is trying to say.
Well, it's the idea that the country itself rose to greatness and kind of had this
it was
sense
that
of community
little historical crash course I was giving you.
Yeah, exactly, the Chinese crash course. And then,
Chinese
and then Mao kind of like destroyed all of that and kind of drove China into the ground, right?
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's like
never mind.
No, yeah, that's
not a history girl.
No, my point with that just being that like I think I might have actually said that earlier.
I think you did, but not a history girl. It's okay.
So, anyways, my point is that like this archetype from transitioning from a high state to low state doesn't necessarily. I don't think. I mean, it might necessarily have to do that, but it means that like it is coming from a certain like higher level, like a glorified level. Like when they talk about the sunshine in it, like the sun itself was, Mao is still impactful, not because of what he read, not because of what he did, but because of the like emotions he invoked for the country.
Like they kind of like brought people together. Right, almost like a patriotism idea. That's
like, yeah. And I mean, we can apply a modernish day example from like 2008, like Olympics, okay? So in the opening ceremony of the Olympics, the Chinese like went out and they gave a whole like dynasty display of like their what occurred in China up until a certain point. The certain point was right around the time of Mao's rise to power and the Chinese Cultural Revolution, because of the stain is sort of left on China.
Yeah, it's almost like
tangible stain.
The tangible stain.
The tangible stain, but emotionally, the real stain is for the people that had loved ones lost in the events and all that stuff. But
there's a lot that happened in that time that is emotional for all people, whether they were directly affected or just their country was affected.
So they completely ignored that part of history, which is
that's crazy.
But isn't it weird to think about? But it's crazy. But would we not have done the same? Would any other nation not have done the same?
It's like if all of a sudden we just acted like a president just didn't exist. It's
right.
just weird. It's weird to think about because we haven't had something like that necessarily that I at least have experienced yet. And so I think it's interesting to see the way that they handle it and the way that they respond to it when it's something that I'm not necessarily able to sympathize with directly because I'm just not familiar enough with those emotions and those ideas and those experiences.
Right. But I mean, in that context, does it make sense how there's kind of have reached a somewhat lower state in terms of their like in terms of God, I'm just losing anyways, so I have,
but I think it's the fall is applicable back to the archetype. The fall is applicable because we see the way that the country transitioned from this high to low state.
She's just been reading off my notes. That's where all the good stuff is. None of it's up here. None of it's up here anymore.
But I mean,
I think we hit most of that.
I think we hit everything we wanted to.
Lights, music,
we talked about.
Thread, sunshine. We talked about that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did.
Thread. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I guess lastly, just concluding what we went through, we talked about the conflicts the internal conflicts suffered by the main character. We talked about the protagonist, antagonist, how we sort of classified those.
The way the cinematography impacted the film itself and kind of made the film what it was.
Nice, yeah.
The camera angles, the lightings, the sounds, the sound
and
effects,
how that influenced
music.
The emotions that went throughout the film.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess really what I got out of this film is that I don't want to be involved in a position where I have to go into another country and change things, or even on an individual level. It doesn't have to be nationwide. It doesn't have to be such a macro scale. Just don't change things. Everyone's unique. No, seriously. That's the point, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that the point of it?
I guess.
What was your point? What was your point? I don't know.
I'm lost.
I don't know. Anyways, we're gonna call it on that, and
Thanks for having me.
yeah.